Candace Owens was on Piers Morgan's show, and the issue of her anti-Semitism came up right at the start. I didn't find this part involving labeling and name-calling that interesting, so I will jump straight to the first argument she comes out with.
I don't view Jewish people to be some exception where you're allowed to now call everybody anti-Semites because you can't actually debate what Bibi Netanyahu is doing and why so many people around the world are not comfortable with it. So yes, they can award that all they want. People are mocking it. It's now become like cartoonish. And they have, unfortunately or fortunately, completely removed the power from that term.
What is your view of Jewish people, of Judaism?
Yeah.
For the record, what's your view?
My view is that, Judaism is a faith. Israel is a state. It is not above critique. And that what Bibi Netanyahu has done to the Palestinians since October 7th is a Holocaust.
She says that you can't criticize Israel without being called an anti-Semite. Really? Is there a country that has been more criticized than Israel in the last year? Have you heard any criticism over, let's say, Yemen, where 10 times as many people have died? I bet you haven't. On Piers Morgan's show alone, about half of the guests he's had on in the last year have criticized Israel. Cenk Uygur, Barghouti, Aaron Mate, Jeffrey Sachs, Mahdi Hassan, Bassem Youssef, Norman Finkelstein, Gabor Mate, Dan Bilzerian, Roger Waters. I will be coming back to the differences between Candace Owens and all these men, but for now let's just say that Candace Owens doesn't have to worry too much. There are plenty of people who are ready to criticize Israel. She's not some courageous outliner daring to speak out against Israel. She's just another brick in the wall. Her second argument isn't that smart either.
The larger discussion that's happening right now is whether or not having survived a Holocaust gives you the permission to commit a Holocaust. And for whatever reason, people have been, what I would say, milking the Holocaust narrative in the same way that Black Americans were milking the slavery narrative and essentially saying, like, we lived through this and we survived this. And so now nobody can say that anything we do is wrong. And that's the big issue today, is that we have so many people that will not recognize that it is totally feasible that a Jewish person, and I'm speaking here about Bibi Netanyahu, could do something as horrific as what was done to the Jews throughout World War II or throughout history.
Well, no. No Israeli has ever said that because the Jews went through the Holocaust, they are now allowed to commit a Holocaust of their own. We don't say that, and we don't think that, and we don't operate that way. First, we didn't start this war. Hamas did. And they can end it too by bringing back the hostages. So very simple. And second, had Israel wanted to kill all the Palestinians, it could have done that in a single day. Instead, Israel risks the lives of its own soldiers to go inside houses to prevent civilians from being harmed. Israel does more than any army in the world to warn civilians. In a few minutes, I will be showing you the sources on which Candace bases her claims that Israel is currently committing a Holocaust. She claims that Benjamin Netanyahu knew beforehand about the attack on October 7th. Now, I'm not a fan of Netanyahu. I think that he is a corrupt man who surrounds himself with corrupt ministers. But to say that he knew what was coming and wanted the attack to happen so that he could go on to commit genocide, this is beyond stupid. It is more like a conspiracy theory. Until October 7th, nobody in Israel was even aware that Hamas had the ability to commit such an attack. Having a suicide bomber attack a bus? Yes. Killing a family in a settlement? Yes. These were the things Hamas had done until then. These were the kind of things they were good at. But overrunning villages in Israel over the course of 3 days, nobody thought they could pull something like that off. Now, you might say, what about the fact that we now know the Israeli army knew about Hamas's plans? And that is true, but Hamas had always had ambitious plans to kill Jewish civilians, to attack Israel from the harbors, to blow up a train with fuel in a big city, to bring down the highest building in Israel. At the end of the day, the Israeli army didn't think that Hamas was capable of such a large-scale attack. Furthermore, the Israeli army was certain that Hamas would coordinate such big plans with the Iranians, and that intelligence would then intercept these plans. Now, there is no question that the Israeli army failed big time on many levels on October 7th. But no Israeli leader would have known about the impending attack and not tried to prevent it. Now, Candace Owens says bravely what she's basing her views on.
Social media completely transformed my perspective on what's happening in Israel and Palestine. And I'm disgusted with myself for not being more awake, whether or not social media can color you the wrong way. For the first time ever, we were just able to see what was happening in Palestine. Before, we just had to rely on legacy media who has
So did you believe all you were seeing?
When I first saw it, I kind of wanted to wait. But I'm now getting my information because I ended up signing up for Haaretz and Israeli newspapers because they're protesting it. They're calling this an ethnic
No, I read that stuff all the time. Yeah.
If Israeli newspapers are calling this an ethnic cleansing, why do we not have people in the Western media that have the courage to call it the same? It's clearly not anti-Semitism. Why on earth would Haaretz media or a Haaretz Israeli newspaper be anti-Semitic and want to see the undoing of Jews?
So she's basing her opinion that Israel is committing a Holocaust on TikTok and Instagram videos. And she says this with such confidence. To be fair, she did mention an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz. But there is an important point to be made here. She says, if an Israeli newspaper is saying that Israel is committing genocide, then why can't I say that? Haaretz is an extreme left-wing newspaper. Many of the writers are not Zionist or even anti-Zionist. And let me clarify that by Zionist, I mean a person who recognizes Israel's right to exist. The publisher himself is not a Zionist. The thing is that Israel is a democracy, and there is freedom of speech. As an Israeli, I can say that I hate the government. I can say that Israel is committing a genocide. I can say that Bibi is a war criminal, and nothing will happen to me. Candace Owens has forgotten one very basic thing, which is a little surprising seeing as she works in the media. Just because someone says something or writes it in a newspaper, that doesn't mean it is correct. All it means is that that person enjoys the right, the privilege, the gift, and the liberty of free speech. I thought that Candace, as a right-wing conservative, would know to appreciate that. Candace won't see anyone in Gaza criticizing Hamas. Do you know why? Let me tell you the story of Ziad Abu Haya. He did the unthinkable and uploaded a video from Gaza against Hamas.
بناشد العالم كله انقذونا من حماس قبل اليهود انقذونا من حماس قبل اليهود هدول تجار في دمنا كل يوم بتأسفوا دمنا فرجوا كيف أطفالنا ونسانا بالشوارع يا أمة عربية يا أمة إسلامية يا ضمير العالم انقذونا من حماس قبل اليهود انقذونا من حماس قبل اليهود.
After this video started to make waves, Hamas dragged him naked from his house and broke his legs and hands. Terrible, right? Well, that's not the end of the story. 2 months later, the Hamas people came back and killed him right in front of his children. Please don't just take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. His name is Ziad Abu Haya. You might say that this is just one isolated incident. And who knows? Well, take a look at this woman, Islam Hijazi.
Hello everyone, I'm Islam Hijazi, Gaza Program Manager at Hill Palestine. Today I'm proud to announce the opening of our new Hill Palestine Field Hospital at Mawasi Khan Younis.
I bet you haven't heard about her on Al Jazeera or The Guardian. Hamas wanted the money she had collected for the hospital, but she didn't want to give it to them. So they shot 90 bullets into her. She had 2 small children. This is Hamas. These are the Palestinians. And in general, this is how it works in the Arab Muslim world. There is no free speech in Gaza or Qatar or Egypt or Saudi Arabia. Candace, if you don't hear any criticism coming out of a certain place, it is not because there isn't any criticism. It is because you will end up dead if you speak up. The fact that people are free to write the worst things about Israel in an Israeli newspaper proves one thing only, that free speech is thriving in Israel. Other points I've made up until now are concerned with what Candace is saying, but what she said isn't that original. Plenty of guests have said the same thing on the Piers Morgan show. But unlike all the others who criticize Israel, Owens is different in two regards. First, she's a woman and she talks about women's rights. And second, she is a Christian. And she really failed in both respects. The title of her video on the Piers Morgan show is I Am Disgusted with Myself. And I couldn't agree more. The fact that she's a woman doesn't change much. But Candace has spoken quite a lot in the past about how she, as a woman, finds that modern feminists don't represent her and that there has never been a better time to be a woman than today in the West. I agree with her on that one. But why not use the platform she has to say a few words about women's rights in Muslim society? Just before the war, Hamas introduced a new law in Gaza, meaning unmarried women can't leave the home without the consent of a man in their family. And there are so many examples of how poorly developed, or rather non-existent, the rights of women are in the Muslim world. But Candace says nothing about any of that. As a proud and vocal Catholic, she's also the first Christian guest to say these things. Let's see what she has to say on the next topic, which is the Christians in Syria.
Yeah, exactly. How I do it. I only way more up to date on what's going on, but my concern is that, and even if it is not happening imminently, that a lot of Christians are about to be murdered. And listen, and about the broader conversation of Israel's involvement, which I showed on my show with Scott Horton, them admitting that they armed Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra. All of this is just inappropriate and wrong. And you just keep calling yourselves victims, and you've been caught so many times funding rebels, giving rebels weapons to pursue Israel's aims in the region.
This is unbelievable. You bash Israel for half an hour, then along comes a new topic, the Christians in Syria. And what do? Blame Israel for its involvement in Syria. Where does this sick obsession with Israel comes from? I wish there was a word for this obsession, and a cure. Assad and his Islamic groups have killed 500,000 Syrians. Israel treated thousands of Syrians casualties in Israeli hospitals for free. But Candace just can't stop blabbering about Israel. Now, is Israel involved in Syria in some way? Yes, Israel supports the Kurds, who, by the way, are the truly oppressed people in the Middle East. But no one seems to care about them. Israel doesn't support Islamist groups, as they all hate Israel. And you know who else is involved in Syria? The US, and Turkey, and Russia, and Iran, and Jordan, and Qatar. But for some reason, Candace just had to mention Israel. I find it interesting that Candace says about 10 times that Israel is committing a Holocaust and committing genocide. In Syria, the number of casualties is 10 times higher, but Candace, who can usually be relied on to be very articulate, just can't find the words to describe what is going on there. Bibi is the devil, and Assad is, I don't know, just a regular Muslim ruler who killed hundreds of thousands of his own people. And the best word to describe what the Muslims are doing to Christians in the Muslim countries is, that's right, genocide. In every Muslim country, Christians are disappearing in genocidal numbers. In Iraq, the number of Christians has dropped by 90% in recent years. In Nigeria, 50,000 Black Christians have been murdered by Muslim groups. Candace Owens' sick obsession with Israel far outweighs her concerns for her fellow Christians. I don't know what Jesus would have said about that. And Candace, just to make sure, you do know that Jesus was Jewish, right? And by the way, Candace didn't even have to choose which flag to raise, the women's right one or the Christian one. She could have just raised them both and spoken about the kidnapping of Christian girls by Muslims in Egypt. If a Jew were to kidnap a Christian girl, imagine that. All the newspapers would be talking about it for years to come. But Muslims kidnapping Christian girls in Egypt, and the world remains silent about it, as does Candace. It is such a shame that Candace, a conservative, has joined the ranks of the woke progressive left with this hatred of Israel. By the way, I made a video about the weird connection between the Arab world and the left, and I will be leaving the link below. That is it for today. Please subscribe and share this video with a conservative friend. I want to thank all my supporters. If you want to support my work, then get my Jerusalem Crash Course. You will find that link below too. It is an easy way to support my work and learn something at the same time. See you next week. Yalla bye.